I am going to blow my brains out, you say to yourself after dropping a bowl of cereal. This day is already off to a terrible start. Why did I even bother getting out of bed? To distract yourself from this ordeal, you go on your phone and look at some memes. They might be a bit on the negative side, but they make you feel better about yourself because at least you're not alone in your misery. After cleaning all of that mess up, you hop on Discord to chill with some of your friends. You told them about the cereal incident, and it turned into an invitation for group venting. It turns out everyone's day hasn't been going great. Thaddeus lost his job recently and has to go through interview hell again. Carmichael's car broke down and he doesn't have the money to fix it, so now he has to battle bums on the bus every day to get to work. And then there's Jeremy. You tried to remember when Jeremy had something good to say about his life, but you couldn't. He keeps making jokes about wanting Truck-kun to finally hit him so he can get isekai'd into a better life. He regularly sends memes like pressing a button that has a chance to end your life in exchange for money and spamming it. You all just laugh it off, but you decide to ask him if everything is okay, and he says, "Yeah, it's fine. I don't want to bother you with my problems anyways. We all have our own issues to deal with." So you decide to back off. But later in the night, you suddenly get a text from him at 3 AM, thanking you for everything and saying that he loves you. Depression. We always like to joke about it, or the misery we experience throughout daily life, but talking about it more sincerely isn't as common in Gen Z compared to the funny jokes. Until it's far too late. But when did we even get to this point? Where even among our closest friends we have a tendency to hide our true feelings beyond so many layers of irony that we forget which one the original is. How many times does one have to joke about having thoughts of self-termination until it's recognized as a call for help? And how can we start being sincere again? As a Gen Z fellow myself, I have huge problems with sincerity, especially online. I mean, this very video is filled with memes because I can't stop being ironic, and I can't stop being this sort of jester character. It is undeniable that a lot of our social interactions are happening online now, but the internet is probably one of the least sincere places there is. I mean, most of the stuff you see on here should always be taken with a grain of salt. But I don't think this is good for us. For one, the rise of misinformation on here has already caused unimaginable damage to our society, and on top of that, if we can never talk about our emotions sincerely, they might all start seeming like a joke to us. Or nothing serious. And as you know, sharing your emotions at least used to be a basic human function. It helps us deal with and address them better. But if a lot of people now only get to share their emotions online, they have to deal with the consequences. If you try to be serious about anything, you will most likely be met by a wave of bots and trolls who will gladly belittle you and your feelings for sweet internet points. And here I have one of the first reasons for the online space being the way it is, and that is the lack of incentives for sincerity. Most of social media was made in such a way that quick, easy to understand quippy responses get pushed to the top because everyone can understand and enjoy them. While long discussion type posts are ignored, not just because people have a much shorter attention span now, but also because a lot of the time it's just some unintelligible ramblings of some crazy basement dweller. We have this tendency, usually built in us, that we trust things that are easy to understand. That in itself is good. The simplest explanation is most likely the correct one, and all of that. But when it comes to a much more nuanced and detailed topic like depression, you can't summarize it in 2 sentences. Depression is so complex actually that we're still not entirely sure what causes it. For the longest time, it was believed to be a chemical imbalance in the brain, but upon further examination, this appears to not be the case. So a lot of nuance around the topic is lost because short and funny responses tend to get the most likes, but that's not the only reason depression is a laughing matter to us. Only the jester is allowed to criticize the king, so when it comes to sensitive topics, humor is often one of the only ways we can express ourselves around a taboo subject. But we can't delve deep into our issues through jokes. Even if you did, how many people would take it seriously? Not a lot because it's a joke, duh. It's not supposed to be taken seriously. Let's face it, humor is a very easy entry-level way to start a conversation about something deeper, especially if it's something vulnerable like your feelings. You joke about it, gauge the reaction of others around you, and if somebody tries to make you uncomfortable for it, you can just claim it was a joke. This might seem like a smart solution to the problem of being openly vulnerable, but the problem is it relies on someone else picking up what you're putting down. If every single time you try to talk about your feelings of depression, you get dismissed as simply joking, eventually you'll turn into the jonkler. Irony and sarcasm is a great shield against personal attacks and the painful feelings of rejection. You're never truly vulnerable if you're never fully sincere, because the last thing you want to be when talking about your state of being is hurt. And the truth is, many of us have been burned before. But if you're ironic all the time, then how do you know when you're being sincere? In your snarky mask of irony, did you lose yourself in your empathy towards others because you have no empathy for yourself? I think never-ending irony is making people forget how to be sincere, especially around their emotions. And what makes it worse is that if everyone is being ironic and sarcastic all the time, you're the odd one out, and you'll be an easy target because you take things quote-unquote too seriously. It's almost become this group mentality of never breaking the veil of irony without being considered cringe. But what if you genuinely just enjoy irony a lot? Should you feel bad for laughing? No, of course not. Self-deprecating jokes can be really funny, otherwise they wouldn't be so popular, right guys? In fact, I think being able to laugh about one's predicament gives us a sense of control, like you're having the last laugh even if your depression is beating you up pretty heavily. Being serious can also be quite stressful, especially if you start thinking about whether you'll ever get out of your depression. Or whether you will be remembered by anybody after you pass away, and that every second wasted on gooning can never be brought back, and what if the world ends tomorrow, and you look back on your life with sheer, unmistakable, earth-shattering regret. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, right, it's not that deep, bro. When your life is very heavy, you seek lightheartedness and humor, because even in its dark variety, it can lighten the mood. I mean, what else are you supposed to do when you've been depressed for so long? At some point, it gets boring. Really boring. So you might as well joke around about it. I think another reason why joking about depression is so common among Gen Z is that it occupies a lot of our mind, as morbid as that might sound. If being depressed is all you can really think about, because it sucks like that, not only will your humor be impacted by it, but basically everything you do. Sometimes laughing through the pain can make you forget how serious it actually is, good or bad. But this rise in depressing media is concerning to me, especially because most of it feels like people venting their feelings and offering no solutions. You can't solve problems without solutions, so what's the plan here? Going online now just feels like going through a swamp of negativity. Explosion this, terror that, and how many variations of the "I'll end my life at any minor inconvenience" can you hear before it gets old and tired? I think most people are either starting to get tired or are already tired of it all. So they've kind of shut themselves off and just occasionally make some quip about how terrible everything in their life is. But there is a cost to self-deprecating humor, and that is your self-esteem. It's good to be able to take a joke and be the butt of the joke from time to time, and you can roast yourself in a good-natured way, but most people struggle to draw the line between a healthy amount of self-reflection versus hurting your self-image for outside approval. If you only talk about yourself in this negative light, even if it's supposed to be a joke, it will affect your mental state and perception of yourself, because our brain is not that great at understanding our own jokes. And I believe that in comedy, oftentimes there's a little bit of truth behind every joke and funny quip, and you probably even know this about yourself. For example, why would you call yourself useless so often if you have never considered yourself useless? The thought has to come from somewhere, and oftentimes, it comes from your subconscious. It can also be a form of narcissism because you're still thinking of yourself all the time, just very negatively. Hating yourself passionately is not the same as being self-aware. It's literally just the opposite of traditional narcissism, where you think you're the best thing to ever happen to anyone. The truth is somewhere in between of worshipping yourself and hating your own guts. What helped me with accurately assessing myself as what type of person I am was by looking at myself through the third person. Imagine a person that's not you, with all of your same attributes, acting the way you did in any given situation. I hope this can help you with your assessment. But back to the main topic at hand. Depression is a laughing matter for Gen Z for many reasons. One is that so many people claim to be depressed in one way or another, it's almost ridiculous. We can joke about it so openly because we know our peers understand what we mean. Once again, joking about it can help us feel like we're in control again instead of it constantly dictating our lives. But if you read between the lines of common self-deprecating jokes, you will quickly find a pattern of behavior. In fact, all of these thoughts have to originate from somewhere, unless you just stole them from the internet, but even then, the act of joking about yourself is a form of self-reflection. You're acknowledging your flaws and your internal emotions. You're either painfully aware of this fact and are using it to try to be more open with your peers, or you've suppressed these emotions so deeply, the only way they surface is through things like humor, for example. But I want you to notice when this happens and start thinking about the things you say and the way you say them. Maybe it's not as obvious as "I want to do the Kurt Cobain special LMAO." It could be speaking about yourself in a dismissive way, like constantly apologizing for basically existing, or dismissing your internal feelings as no big deal. I think our choice of language does affect the way we think, but I don't think this effect is as significant as revealing your true emotions and opinions. If you have hidden yourself behind layers upon layers of irony, you can use this method of analyzing your answers to determine what your true thoughts and opinions on the subject are. Or if you didn't lose yourself in an endless cloud of irony, but know someone who is basically permanently ironic, reading between the lines might help you gauge how they really feel. But I don't think the average person should be forced to psychoanalyze the person they're speaking to know if they're being genuine or not. Ideally, you could just be real with each other once in a while. But it can be very scary to be genuine because you can't take back what you said as simply being a joke, so you need to trust each other a lot. And here is the deeper problem hiding behind insincerity, a lack of trust. Trusting a person has become much more difficult since any information about you can be spread in an instant. And not only that, but they can take screenshots of your conversation if you're communicating through text or simply record what you said in VC if they're really evil, and now there is undeniable proof of you having said something that can be used against you. If you mainly communicate online with people, you basically have to be ironic all the time to protect yourself and your reputation. The average person is not meant to speak as if the world is watching them, and human language is extremely complex, so it can be ridiculously easy to say something you didn't mean, and have that be taken out of context and posted online. Even if what you said is despicable, I believe people change, and it should not make you an evil person if you said the N-word when you were a teenager. I'll admit, English is not my first language, and I used to think that the N-word was another word for black person, but thankfully, I never said it online. But imagine if I got cancelled for it because I typed it out in a private Discord conversation, or if I had a spiteful ex or something. They could also leak a lot of private information about me, so how are you supposed to be sincere about your feelings and emotions online? Here's the thing, you don't. I believe that being truly sincere online will get you hurt most of the time, so instead of communicating online, you have to do it in real life, person to person. But here's another problem. A lot of people in the modern day don't communicate a whole lot in real life due to various reasons. Maybe their friends are too far away for a quick chat, or they don't have a third place to hang out at. Simply put, it's easier to meet up online in a lot of ways. But how are you supposed to be sincere then? Especially if it's about a sensitive topic like being depressed. The best personal solution in my opinion is to find someone you can really trust, and I know this isn't easy. By no means is there one solution that fits all the people watching this video. But essentially you have to build trust with a person over a prolonged period of time, and slowly let each other be real with one another. I think you should probably start off small with information you wouldn't mind getting leaked out into the world, and slowly progress to more difficult topics. It will take time, and there is a real chance you could be backstabbed. But in that case, literally deny everything, claim AI fabricated it, and say that you were joking. Fight back by exposing them, take them with you. I know my friends would be just as cooked if they tried to expose me. But seriously, intimacy always carries the risk of being hurt, but the one who always stays in a cave will never get to see the stars. If you don't want to deal with this whole BS just because you want to be sincere once in a while, I understand why you might simply lead an isolated lifestyle, but in my opinion, the risk of being known is worth it. And depression in particular is most dangerous when your ill mind is the only thing communicating with you. Remember, if you are in a depressed state of mind, you are very likely to see things as worse than they actually are, and having someone there with an outside perspective can greatly help you with overcoming the things that are causing your depressed state. The vast majority of people who jump off bridges and survive the fall realize mid-fall that all of their problems were either solvable or meaningless to begin with. So I hope you can come to that realization much quicker before the worst case scenario happens. But what kind of depression am I even talking about? Well, I'll answer that with another question. Does it even matter? There is a big difference between simply being depressed and having major depressive disorder, but if you're constantly in a state of depression due to your life circumstances, and not your brain malfunctioning, what does that make you? So to clarify, I am talking about the state of being depressed, whether it's because of mental illness or simply your brain's reaction to your circumstances. So obviously, a lot is going on in the world right now, and everything feels like it's on fire more than ever before. You cannot watch the news for a single second without taking nat 20 psychic damage to your cranium. Mass deportation, war, pestilence, the whole four horsemen actually. So if you're just a regular person trying to live your life, all of this might make you very depressed because what's the point? You're still young, but old enough to be responsible for your own decisions, and you see this world that's been left for you after decades of BS, and you're supposed to build your own future here. This might sound bad, but your depressed state might be logical. We get very sad when we see upsetting things, so if you only see things that upset you, you'll be one sad duckling. But good news is that nothing is wrong with you for feeling that way. Your feelings are completely valid, but that doesn't mean they get to dictate your reaction to negative information in perpetuity. Ultimately, you can only take control of your own actions, and if you can't do anything about it, then don't. We all have to find happiness where we can, even if it's something like a video game or a really good show. Happiness comes from within, so just minimize the amount of negativity you perceive throughout the day, so the small pleasantries throughout your daily routine feel that much better to you. For example, eating delicious food without being glued to Kanye West's mental breakdown on Twitter, you can actually focus on the food instead of whatever insanity is going on online. I believe that's the key takeaway here. Write it down if you have to. We shouldn't combat our depressed state by adding things that are supposed to make us happy, but by removing the things that are causing us to feel this way as much as we're able to, and focus on the things that do make us happy. Can't be mad at Twitter drama if you don't have Twitter, or can't be outraged at the news if you don't watch them. Don't worry, if you're looking at the news in case of something big happening, you'll hear about it anyways. COVID was unavoidable, for example. But of course, easier said than done, as always. Talk is cheap, but even then. Discussing mental health on a more serious level often isn't as engaging to the average person as some silly memes on the screen talking about how hard life is. And I get it, it's a difficult and nuanced topic. If you yourself are depressed, you likely feel some sort of shame associated with it. Relatability is another huge issue when it comes to sincerity in media. Seeing other people struggle with the same issues makes you feel better about yourself. You know the saying, misery loves company, but it doesn't even have to be malicious. That also doesn't help that the people who claim to be able to help you to get out of your depressed state are grifters who just want to take your money. So you start to grow weary of anybody who claims to have a solution to your problem. And honestly, you're right to be cautious. Being depressed makes you an extremely vulnerable target, and it can make you feel like something is wrong with you specifically. How can you be so depressed when everyone else is seemingly having the time of their lives on their Insta stories? Of course, social media contorts reality into something it isn't, and even influencers aren't ecstatic about their life every single day. But this mirage can make you feel even more isolated from your close friends and peers. So, once again, you start gravitating towards the comfy sadness, and the algorithm also plays a massive role in feeding you the content you see. Not only does it suggest you content based on your previous history and behavior, it incentivizes the exact behavior I've been criticizing in this video. Who do you think will get more likes? An easy to understand quick funny comment or an in-depth explanation relating to mental health? Wrong, it's actually Fetty Fazbear's with 3 laughing emojis because the internet is overrun with bots and children. But my point is, in a person's daily media, it is very hard for them to even find sincere and in-depth views on any given topic unless they actively go out and look for it. Serious responses often don't get as much attention as the jokey ones because the only metric that matters online is popularity, and not factual information. Seeing a funny relatable meme will make you feel better in the short term, and you can come across it on accident, but if you are looking into ways on how to not be depressed anymore, you'll be bombarded with grifters who want to make a quick buck out of you, or questionable mental health services because they pay a lot into advertising. If I made a video called The Nuances of Depression and how to get yourself in a better position through incremental changes in your everyday life, it wouldn't even be recommended in the first place because it barely has any keywords in it, and even if it was recommended, most people wouldn't click on it because the title is too long and it's boring. Because the algorithms dictate what gets recommended and what doesn't, you have to fill everything with tags and keywords just so your message can be seen at all. So this results in good videos on the topic being hard to find because they are playing the same metagame as the clickbait channels, scammers, and fake gurus. The scammers usually have a pretty decent understanding of the algorithm, so they know how to make their content be seen by more people. Ever since YouTube removed dislikes, it's also become harder for the average person to tell whether a video is accurate or not, and even then, a scam artist can always just delete all the negative comments from their comment section and add botted ones that praise the video, or Insta, TikTok post, whatever. Thankfully, YouTube for example did add a feature that displays whether someone is a medical professional or not, but it's still tricky to find good and accurate information on the topic online, since there's so many evil people out there who want to take advantage of people down on their luck or the desperate. I think the only thing you can do is analyze the information and cross-reference what they're saying with multiple sources, but ain't nobody got time for that. I think we just need to keep track of people who put out good and accurate information online and follow them. This is all part of a larger issue with search engines getting worse because they're trying to put generative AI into them, but the best way I've found to spot scammers is whether they're putting the solutions behind a paywall. Although therapy also isn't free, but at the very least it gives you some guarantee of talking to a professional instead of some random guy on the internet. The even larger issue is actually seeking for a cure in a for-profit system that capitalizes on you being sick by only lessening your symptoms instead of offering permanent solutions. But I will address this at another time. Let's focus on what you can do right now. Another very common reason I see people joke around their very real feelings of depression is because a lot of them equate making people laugh to making people like you, because who doesn't like comedy? And if you experience very little love from people outside of the internet, you start to crave it and get it from other places. Being funny means being loved only if you don't know what being loved feels like. So if you rarely get to feel loved in real life, you might fall into the trap of seeking fake validation online, because in our mind, fake validation is better than no validation. It can also be hard to escape the cycle of self-deprecating humor, because if you put all of your skill points into self-deprecating humor, this will be your strong suit, logically. So even if you joke about something else, you might not get the same reaction as the classics, so you cling on to them. To get out of the cycle, you just have to accept that you will suck for a little bit in the transitional period, and you will be in a position where you can be funny without demeaning yourself. And most importantly, you shouldn't rely on outside validation, because all of the validation you need can come from yourself. So find out how you can get validation from yourself and don't give in to your old ways. Speaking of old ways, how can you be sure that the new way is better? Because even when you do finally find good advice on how to get out of the depressive state, you'll quickly find out that it takes a lot of time and effort consistently on your part. You can't just watch one Dr. K video, shout out to Dr. K by the way, and meditate the depression away instantly, unless you're built different, but most people can't. It's a very individual task, specific to the person, and you'll have to most likely give up your current lifestyle. I believe this is also a huge issue when it comes to trying to get out of your depressive state, and that is getting comfortable in your depression. If you're in constant misery, you'll probably search for lots of different ways to comfort yourself to lessen the pain. But now, even when you try to get better, you got too accustomed to these comforts in your depression, and now you're more or less dependent on them. So even if your very lifestyle is making your life miserable, you've grown used to that lifestyle and might even yearn for it on some level. Change is often very uncomfortable, and while you're in your in-between phase, you'll have to deal with the discomfort of turning your entire life upside down while still being depressed on top of it. That's a huge investment of time and energy, and if you stop your process of recovery due to any reason, you have to start again, putting you right back to where you started. This loop of painful failure is why a lot of people give up hope and just let their depression take over instead of trying to fight it anymore. They tried, it was more painful than their regular misery, and they failed. But do we all just start walking on our first attempt? If a person's been in a car crash, should they give up the 3 weeks of physical therapy if it didn't cure them? The answer to both is no. You should never stop trying, but you should also be careful with your attempts. The biggest mistake I see when someone's trying to get out of their depressive lifestyle is that they assume one setback means it's all over. It's not. It's never over till we bite the dust. And an additional mistake I commonly see when trying to get out of your depressed state is attaching yourself to this persona of being depressed. Almost romanticizing it in a way. And if you are known as this funny chill guy or gal that always jokes around and keeps a cool head, it will result in major dissonance with your internal struggles because you know that you struggle on the inside, yet you can't show it because you would break this character that you have created to be liked by everyone. In an age of fame, being liked has become a matter of utmost importance. Everybody loves somebody that's funny, so if you stay funny, even when you feel terrible on the inside, you'll get more people to like you. So because we make these caricatures of ourselves online and even in real life, we might start to feel like we can't break them without some grave consequences. It also doesn't help that if you tell people you're depressed sincerely, usually they don't have the best of reactions. Because it's never been taught to us at school or by our parents. But usually it's some compassionate words mixed in with some pity. Being pitied is not nice, and most depressed people I know don't want pity for their situation. They want compassion, understanding, or even help. It takes a lot to admit that you might need help in one way or another, or emotional support, and a concerning amount of people believe they can fix their depression on their own. Even if they aren't professionals, in reality, it's much easier to deal with it with the help of friends and family. Although, take this with a grain of salt, because a lot of people are depressed as well, so they can't even help you if they tried. Some people definitely can't even help themselves for the most part. I think more people would generally help you with your depression if they could, but it's not taught anywhere, really. I think the idea that a mental health professional is the only one who is able to help you is terrible in my opinion, because first of all, people in the field of psychiatry are already extremely overworked and understaffed, and secondly, it can be very costly, so you might not be able to afford it, or you'll have to wait 6 months for an appointment. Most people only go to a psychiatrist or therapist when it's become absolutely necessary, and I think this is an insane approach. We have a first aid initiative for physical health, but why not mental health? Just putting this out there. Wink wink. Sometimes we need to have these serious discussions about our emotions, and I don't think therapists should be the only ones who are able to listen to us vent. Also, it would be very cool if you weren't so vicious to each other online, but I don't see that changing anytime soon. So if you're going to be sincere about your feelings, you should probably do it in real life. But what we can be sincere about online are the solutions to help us get out of our collective slump. Humans aren't perfectly logical creatures, and information that's supposed to be a joke or an over-exaggeration can quickly lead into a dangerous misunderstanding. You would not believe how many people base their entire worldview through information they only tangentially heard from memes. Here's an example of how much nuance is lost by just repeating jokes over and over again instead of providing information. Not taking your meds is often joked about, or taking the normal pill. Curse you, dream. When it comes to antidepressants, it's not as easy as taking a pill and it making you happy. Medication works, but not in the way you might imagine. For example, if your depression is caused by your inability to control your impulse brash decisions, a sedative might help you calm yourself. Or if you have severe problems with regulating your emotions, numbing them might make things easier for you. An antidepressant isn't necessarily a get-out-of-jail-free card for depression, but rather a complex cocktail of different medications meant to deal with some of the things that might be causing your depressive state. Oh, and they have a chance to backfire and make you possibly even more depressed. I feel like a person should generally know this information, even if they aren't intending on using antidepressants, since people with depression like to self-medicate on themselves. I had to scroll through the internet to find this information, yet the normal pill meme, or meds just making you happy, have been so pervasive, at least for me personally. I could have believed that it just turns your brain normal or something. While I think it's great that Gen Z makes so many memes about depression, not only are they in a bit of a circle jerk, but you simply can't convey the immense complexity of the human mind through memes only. And a bit unrelated, but did you know that antidepressants are only marginally more effective than the placebo effect? This is not to say that the medication is bad, but this shows the power of the placebo effect. If you simply drink a sugar pill with the belief that it will cure your depression, there's a chance that it will work. So always use the placebo effect to your advantage. Statistically, somebody who watches this video will eventually succeed in curing their depression through sugar pills or prayers, and that will be a proud day for me. You can help yourself and others by figuring out step by step what is making them so depressed and what they could do to change it. Sometimes, all they need is a little push and accountability. Instead of focusing on how much your life sucks, try to focus on what your actions can achieve to change the factors that are making you depressed. Don't give up. Progress is slow, but steady. No matter what is going on in the outside world, in your mind, you are free. Having life be dictated by your vices often leads to depression, and that's why self-medication is so dangerous, you little rascals. If you let your depression do its thing, it can paralyze you for years potentially. So you need to learn from your mistakes. If nothing works, then you're not noticing what does. First, identify where your problems are. Secondly, analyze what you can do to address them, and whether they are in your control or not. And I hope you know the drill by now. In your control, take action. Out of your control, no action needed. And lastly, don't just keep trying, but keep trying different approaches. Doing the same thing every time and expecting a different outcome is the definition of insanity. So if your methods of getting out of your rut don't work, change them until they do. Sometimes only parts of it will work, so write them down. Narrow down the methods to repeated tries until it finally does work. Remember that progress is almost never linear, and there will be some days where you make less progress than what you expected, but sometimes you'll surprise yourself. Simply giving up in favor of the comfort of your depression will make you so much more miserable than trying to get out of it. I know it's cliche, but seriously, it starts off small. If you know someone who jokes a little too much about ending it all, you should check up on them. We could all use a little more sincerity from time to time, and it starts with you. If you're not sincere with yourself, then how can you be sincere with others? I personally found out why I was so depressed through Socratic questioning, but everyone is different, so you might find out your reason in a different way. Thank you all so much for watching. I have a Discord server linked in the description below. Shout out to my Patreon members, you guys are awesome, and bye bye.